Hello guys, welcome to Buddi Academy and this is Uma here and I'm back with a new content in biology today. And before we go to our class, it's tip time. So here we go, tip number 2. Always stick to your syllabus and have that in your mind. So it is very good to gain additional information and knowledge, but when you are preparing for your board exam, it is very important to stick with your syllabus. So before you start your preparation, just have a clarification and verification of your syllabus and start your preparation. So let us move on to our class now. Today we are going to discuss about the third and fourth chapter, that is human reproduction and reproductive health. In sexual reproduction in flowering plants, that lesson will come for only 5 to 6 marks, like we have discussed it in the previous class. So eventually these two lessons will have a weightage of 8 to 9 marks and it is always repeated in the 5 mark, 4 mark categories. That is, it will be always repeated in long answer categories again, which we will be discussing in this class. So please concentrate in that area and prepare accordingly. Come on, let's move to our class. Yes, our first part will be reproductive events in human beings. Before knowing the reproductive events, we should know some characters of human beings. So human beings are unisexual, that is one organism will exhibit only one sex and they exhibit sexual dimorphism. That is, there will be differentiation between the male and female, and also they are viviparous, that is they give live births to young ones. So these are the reproductive events in human beings. First thing is gametogenesis, second is insemination. Gametogenesis is the gamete production, insemination is the deposition of sperms into the female's body, then fertilization, that is fusion of male and female gametes, implantation of the zygote to the uterus, gestation, that is pregnancy time, and parturition, that is delivery time. So before we get on to the gametogenesis, we must know a clear-cut picture of the male and female reproductive system, and we are going to discuss that first. So we are starting with the male reproductive system. The male reproductive system, the primary sex organ is the testis. It is located outside the abdomen and it is descended in a sac-like structure called as scrotum. So when we just proceed, we will be seeing all the parts in detail. I'll just give the names now. Again, testis, vas deferens, epididymis, then there are certain glands which are called as seminal vesicles, prostate gland, and bulbourethral or Cowper's gland, and there will also be an ejaculatory duct where the sperms will be stored and it will be ejaculated out through the penis, that is, it is also the urethra for men. So the testes are situated outside the abdominal cavity, as I said, within a pouch called scrotum. You can see here why it is descended outside the abdominal cavity, because the scrotum can maintain a lower temperature, that is around 2 to 2.5 degrees Celsius. That is lower than the normal body temperature for this process of spermatogenesis, that is sperm production. So you can see these testes contains many lobules, that is many compartments called as testicular lobules. Around 200 to 250 will be present here, and these lobules will contain highly coiled 1 to 3, that is it will be 1 to 3 in number, highly coiled tubules called as seminiferous tubules. These seminiferous tubules will again contain two type of cells, that are male germ cells and Sertoli cells. So this male germ cells will undergo meiotic division and form the sperm, that is the male gamete, whereas the Sertoli cells are responsible to provide nutrition to the developing sperms. And you can see there will be some spaces in between these seminiferous tubules and they will be lined by some cells which are called as interstitial cells or Leydig cells. These Leydig cells are very important because they secrete the testicular hormones called as androgen, that is testosterone. So this is the sectional view of an seminiferous tubule where you can see interstitial cells and you can see the developing spermatogonia, and you can also see the Sertoli cells which is going to provide nutrition. So as soon as when the sperm is formed, it will be embedded in the head of the sperm will be embedded in the Sertoli cells, and then only it will be released. So then there are two major categories you should remember. The first one is male sex accessory ducts and male sex accessory glands. So these male sex accessory ducts are very important. They are 4. The first one is rete testis, the second one is vasa efferentia and epididymis and vasa deferens. So these 4 are very important. This rete testis is nothing but they collect the sperms from the seminiferous tubule and pass it to vasa efferentia. Then it will be moved on to epididymis and then to vas deferens. So the seminiferous tubules of testis open into vasa efferentia through pretestis. The vasa efferentia leave the testis and open into epididymis located along the posterior surface of each testis. So you should remember all these four accessory ducts and accessory glands that are very important from question point of view. So the epididymis will lead to vas deferens that will ascend to the abdominal cavity and loops over the urinary bladder. So it receives a duct from seminal vesicle and opened into the urethra as an ejaculatory duct. You can see the ejaculatory duct here, and what is being done here is the sperm will be stored here temporarily and the secretions of seminal vesicle and prostate gland will be added in order to nourish the sperms that are being released or which are going to be released. So these ducts store and transport the sperms from testis to outside through urethra, and the urethra originates from urinary bladder and extends through penis to its external opening called as urethral meatus. So what about the external genitalia? It is penis which is going to ejaculate the sperms and also it will send the urine outside. So it is made up of special tissue, so that is why it is helping it in erection. And the enlarged end of penis is generally called as the glans penis, and the loose fold of skin covering that is generally called as the foreskin. Then the male accessory glands, which will include a paired seminal vesicle, one prostate gland and a pair bulbourethral glands. So you should remember bulbourethral glands are also called as Cowper's glands. So as I said, these seminal vesicle and prostate gland are going to nourish the sperm. What they are going to send? They are going to send some secretions which will contain fructose, calcium and certain enzymes. Again, what are their components? It will be fructose, calcium and certain enzymes. And what is the work of this bulbourethral gland? It will help in the lubrication of penis. So pathway of sperm, you can remember it very easily. It can be denoted by this term 7 up, but N generally is considered as silent because it denotes nothing. So whenever you want to remember pathway of sperm, you just remember 7 up. 7 up is nothing but seminiferous tubule, epididymis, vasa deferens, ejaculatory ducts, urethra and penis. I come back again. 7 up, you can remember the pathway of sperm very easily. N stands for nothing. You just remove that word. That is why I have given it in small letter here. So what are they? Seminiferous tubules, epididymis, vas deferens, ejaculatory duct, urethra and the penis. So this is the female reproductive system. It is located in the pelvic region. It begins or it contains a pair of ovaries, as male contains a pair of testes. So female contain a pair of ovaries which are responsible for the production of female gametes, that is ovum. So apart from that, it also contains fallopian tubules, uterus, cervix and the vagina. So the female reproductive system will consist of a pair of ovary, and then it will also contain the fallopian tubule. Fallopian tubule is also called as oviducts. So it is located in the pelvic region. So this female reproductive system along with mammary glands are integrated to support the pregnancy and parturition, that is for the process of ovulation, fertilization, pregnancy, childbirth and childcare. This female reproductive system and mammary glands are integrated. So ovaries are the primary female sex organ which produce the female gamete ovum. It is composed of two regions, that is outer cortex and inner medulla. So these ovaries are also responsible for the production of several hormones which are the ovarian hormones. So ovaries are located one on each side of the lower abdomen. So each ovary is 2 to 4 cm in the length, and each ovary is covered by a thin epithelium which encloses the ovarian stroma, and again as I said, it is divided into outer cortex and inner medulla. So oviducts, again the fallopian tubule, uterus, vagina constitute the female accessory ducts. We saw male accessory ducts and glands, which will be the female accessory ducts here, that is the oviduct, fallopian tubule, uterus and the vagina. So fallopian tubule is generally 10 to 12 cm long, and whenever the ovum is released, this fallopian tubule is the one who is going to receive it. And you should also remember the process of fertilization, that is fusion of gametes, will occur in the fallopian tubule only. This fallopian tubule will contain three parts. One is the funnel-like infundibulum, then the middle portion called ampulla, and the last portion which is being connected to the uterus, which is called as the isthmus portion. So this infundibulum will contain many finger-like projections which are called as fimbriae. So the last part of the oviduct is isthmus and has a narrow lumen and joins to the uterus. So uterus is always single and it is also called as an womb, and it is in the shape of an inverted pear. So it is supported by ligaments that are attached to the pelvic wall, and then it widens into a narrower canal called cervix, and then the vagina, which is the birth canal. So the wall of uterus has three layers of tissue, that is perimetrium, myometrium and endometrium. The perimetrium is the outermost one, whereas the myometrium is the middle one. So this middle one contains the smooth muscle cells. These smooth muscle cells are very important because during the time of delivery, these muscle contracts and helps the uterus to expel the baby out. And then one more important layer is the endometrium. So you can see this is the innermost membrane, that is endometrium. This endometrium will undergo cyclic changes every month, and that is called as the menstrual cycle, which again we will be discussing in this class. So the female external genitalia contains labia majora, labia minora. Hymen is nothing but a small tissue that will partially cover the vagina, then clitoris and opening of urethra, and you can also see the opening of vagina. So one more important thing is the mammary gland. So mammary gland, you know, it contains a pair of breasts. So it is generally made up of, the chest is generally made up of pectoralis major muscle. So this mammary gland is also made up of this muscle, and they are a pair of breasts, and they contain some glandular tissue and variable amount of fat. So this mammary gland is divided into 15 to 20 mammary lobules, and they contain a cluster of cells which are called as alveoli. This alveoli are responsible for secretion of milk, and the milk is stored in the cavities or lumen of these alveoli. Then it moves on to mammary tubules. From there it is stored in the mammary duct, then mammary ampulla, and then it is ejected out or sucked out through the lactiferous duct. So externally milk is sucked out through the nipple, and the dark area which is surrounding the nipple is generally called as areola. So first thing, the glandular tissue of breast will be divided into many mammary lobes which contains cluster of cells called alveoli, and that alveoli will secrete milk, and then this will be stored in the cavities of alveoli. Again, this alveoli open into mammary tubules, then mammary duct and mammary ampulla, and finally through lactiferous duct it is being sucked out. So next process will be gametogenesis process, which is nothing but formation of male and female gamete. And who is responsible for production of this? That is the testes in males and ovaries in the female. So yes, these are the male and female gamete of human beings, that is sperm and the ovum or the egg. So first process will be spermatogenesis process. So this process is nothing but, this is the germ cells. The germ cells will undergo multiplication and mitosis. You should remember multiplication and mitosis. So only at certain point of time it will undergo meiosis. So initially it will undergo mitosis. So mitosis, again many cells are being produced, many spermatogonium, and now these are called as spermatogonium. After mitosis we receive many spermatogonium, out of which some will behave like stem cells, again producing more spermatogonium, whereas other grow and mature in size to become a primary spermatocyte. So first will be the germ cell will undergo mitosis, that is multiplication, and give rise to spermatogonium. Again it will give rise to the primary spermatocyte. What will some spermatogonium do? They behave like stem cell, again giving rise to many spermatogonium, whereas other will grow in size and mature. There is no division or reduction here, just they grow in size and mature to form primary spermatocyte. So this primary spermatocyte is very important because here the reduction division starts. So it will undergo meiosis 1 to produce secondary spermatocyte, and these secondary spermatocyte will undergo meiosis 2 to produce spermatids. So you should remember this primary spermatocyte, meiosis 1, secondary spermatocyte. Then secondary spermatocyte will undergo meiosis 2 to produce spermatids. So what are spermatids? They are circular, haploid and non-motile. So if they ask you the ploidy of primary spermatocyte, you should be telling it as 2N because it has not undergone any reduction division. But if they are asking you the ploidy of spermatids, it will be haploid, that is only N, because they are haploid structures and they are also circular and non-motile. Remember, sperms are always motile, and then these spermatids are converted into sperms by a process called as spermiogenesis. So spermatids are converted into sperms by a process which is called as spermiogenesis. So sperms are different in shape, which we will be discussing, and they are also haploid and motile. So in testes, the immature germ cells produce sperms by spermatogenesis, which begins at the puberty. So as we said, the spermatogonia present on the inside wall of seminiferous tubule multiply, give rise to primary, which again contains 46 chromosomes. Then this primary spermatocyte will again undergo meiosis, and then it will be giving rise to secondary spermatocyte, and then it will undergo meiosis 2 to give rise to spermatids. Spermatids are converted into sperms. So as I said, after the process of spermiogenesis, that is from transformation of spermatids to sperm, sperm eggs become embedded in the Sertoli cells and finally released from the seminiferous tubule by the process called as spermiation. So yes, what would be the number of chromosome in the spermatids? As I said, it will be haploid. So when does this process start? As we have discussed, it will begin at the age of puberty. So how does this process happen? Eventually the question arises. So this happens under the influence of certain hormones. The major hormone responsible for that will be gonadotropin releasing hormone, which will increase during puberty, and this will stimulate the anterior pituitary to release the follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormones. So this follicle stimulating hormone will have an effect on Sertoli cell, and LH will have an effect on Leydig cell. You can just remember SH, Sertoli, and LH, Leydig. So LL and SS, just remember like that. So what is going to happen here? So LH will act on Leydig cells and stimulate the synthesis of androgens. So these androgens in turn are going to stimulate or initiate the process of spermatogenesis, that is formation of sperms. So FSH act on Sertoli cells, secretion of some factor which help in the process of spermiogenesis. So we have already seen what is these GnRH doing. It is going to stimulate the anterior pituitary and release the FSH and LH. So FSH is going to act on Sertoli cells, LH is going to act on the Leydig cells. As we have already seen, these Leydig cells are responsible for production of hormones like testosterone, again androgens. So those androgens are going to stimulate the process of spermatogenesis. What is the work of Sertoli cells then? We saw that it is going to provide nutrition for the developing sperms. So many factors will also be stimulated and produced, which will be helpful in development of sperms, including the process of spermiogenesis. So now we are going to discuss the structure of a sperm. So it is a microscopic structure composed of head, neck, middle piece and tail. So structure of sperm is very important from diagram point of view. So what does it contain? It contains a head part which contains an acrosome. This acrosome is very important because it contains certain enzymes which will be helpful in the fertilization of ovum. That is, during the breaking the wall of the ovum, this acrosomal enzymes will be helping. Again, the mitochondria, several mitochondria are present and they are spiral in shape because several mitochondria are present because this sperm has to exhibit a very faster movement. Again, it contains a plasma membrane and a tail. This tail will help in the whiplash movement of the sperm. So you should remember at least some parts and their function of the sperm. As everything contains, this also contains nucleus, which contains haploid set of chromosome. So again, human male ejaculates about 200 to 300 million sperms in a coitus, which is required for normal fertility. In that, at least 60% should have normal shape, size, and out of that 40% should show the vigorous motility in order for fruitful fertilization. The functions of male sex accessory ducts and glands are also maintained by the testicular hormone. So next we will be discussing about the process of, so you should remember that this oogenesis is a discontinuous process. So it is not continuous, which means that it will be present at some point of your life and after that it will have a gap and then it will continue. So but spermatogenesis is a continuous process and you should remember that. This oogonium are very important because no more oogonium are formed or even added after birth. It will be added when you are in your mother's womb itself. That is why they say your grandmother has carried you. So this oogonium will arise from the germ cells and it will grow in size. So this growth is very important because egg yolk formation occurs here and that process is called vitellogenesis. Here no division is occurring, just growing in size and maturing. So then it forms a primary oocyte. So we said that this will be happening in your intrauterine life itself, in your mother's womb itself. So this growth will be arrested in 25 week, that is 25th week of your gestation. This primary oocyte will not be left as such. It will be covered with some follicles called as primordial follicles, which will be developing into primary follicles. So these primary follicles, within this primary follicular stage, the growth is arrested. Many primary follicles are formed at 25th week of your gestation, around 2 million, and then they degrade and only 60,000 to 800, that is 80,000 primary follicles will be left during your birth time and puberty. So after your puberty, what happens? The primary follicle grows and develops into a secondary follicle. So secondary follicle has differentiation, which is nothing but you can see this as two layers. So the outer layer is called as theca externa and the inner layer is called as theca interna. So you can just remember external and internal. Just remember the word theca. So it is differentiated into outer and inner layer. Then it will develop into a mature tertiary follicle. So this tertiary follicle is nothing but it is characterized by a cavity. This cavity is fluid filled. It contains some fluid and it is called as antrum. So only at this point what happens, this primary oocyte starts to divide and forms a secondary oocyte. So now we are going to see this tertiary follicle will again mature into Graafian follicle and after that only the ovum will be released. So ovum, we generally tell it as ovum during ovulation, but it is the secondary oocyte which is really being released. So primary oocyte inside the tertiary follicle starts dividing. So now only it is the first meiotic division. So primary oocyte is 2n whereas secondary oocyte will be n. You can see that in this division one small body, one small cell is being formed. So why the small cell is being formed? In order for the egg to retain all the nutrition, one large cell and one small cell will be formed after the first meiotic division, and that is called as the first polar body. The smaller one is the first polar body and the larger one is the secondary oocyte. So the first polar body will degenerate. So the polar body will degenerate. It has no significance. It will degenerate. So after this what will happen? The secondary oocyte will be released. The Graafian follicle will rupture. After tertiary follicle, it is the Graafian follicle which is containing the secondary oocyte. This Graafian follicle will rupture to release the ovum. So you can see this diagram is very important. So you have to practice. So first what happens? The primordial follicle, primary follicle, then the oocyte, secondary follicle, Graafian follicle which contains the secondary oocyte, and now the secondary oocyte is released during the ovulation, and after that what happens? The Graafian follicle will grow into corpus luteum. So this corpus luteum will produce enormous amount of progesterone. So you should remember this corpus luteum will produce enormous amount of progesterone. So if fertilization is happening, this corpus luteum is going to act as temporary hormone producer till the placenta formation. So if fertilization is not happening, this corpus luteum will degenerate into corpus albicans, and thereby the progesterone segregation will decrease. It will go down, and this will cause a distability in the endometrial lining, so that the endometrial lining is shed as bleeding, and that is called as menstruation, again which we will be discussing. Now we are going to discuss about the structure of a secondary oocyte. So if they are asking about the structure of an ovum, just remove this first polar body and put second polar body. So even if you are not giving this second polar body, there is no problem. So this contains zona pellucida. It is a jelly coat, and it is the protective layer which is made up of glycoprotein. This corona radiata is nothing but the follicular cells. This will supply nutrition for the developing egg, and it has a cytoplasm and an nucleus. So this is also the structure of an egg. If the first polar body is named as second polar body, and even if second polar body is not named, it is not a problem, but structure of egg is very, very important. So we are going to move into the process of fertilization now. Again, we will be seeing fertilization. Why I am telling it here is only then you will understand when a secondary oocyte turns into an ovum. Only during the process of fertilization. When? During the process of fertilization. So what will happen? First, the sperm will bind to zona pellucida layer. As we said, what will happen? The acrosome will release its contents and it will degrade this zona pellucida layer. Then what happens? This sperm content will enter the cytoplasm, and this triggers the second meiotic division. So during the time of fertilization, you can see this. As the sperm contents are entering into the cytoplasm, that is before the interaction of nucleus, what happens? The secondary oocyte will divide into ovum and second polar body. Again, the second polar body is going to degenerate, and after the process of fertilization, that is after the nuclear interaction, what will happen? It will form a diploid zygote. So yes, the formation of mature gamete is called as female gamete is called as oogenesis, and it is different from spermatogenesis. How it is different? Spermatogenesis is continuous, whereas oogenesis is discontinuous process. After the embryonic life, it is only continuing after puberty. So as I said, no more oogonia are formed or added after your birth. So after that, what we said? We saw that primary oocyte will be surrounded by many layers of cells, and it will form follicles around them, and then primary follicle will develop into secondary, tertiary and Graafian follicle. How this tertiary follicle is characterized? By a fluid-filled cavity called antrum. So after that, what happens? The Graafian follicle, so the division, that is the primary oocyte will divide through meiotic division, and it will form secondary oocyte, and the Graafian follicle ruptures and releases the ovum, that is secondary oocyte. So these are the differences between the spermatogenesis and oogenesis. So how this is happening? This is happening in fetal life, and by birth, childhood time, it is being halted. So it is the growth or the division is being arrested. So first meiotic division is completed prior to ovulation. So then second meiotic division occurs only after ovulation. So you can see this spermatogenesis will start only at puberty and it will continue lifelong, whereas oogenesis will begin at the intrauterine life itself. It will have a pause in the childhood time, birth and childhood time. After that, it will begin in the puberty time. So next will be an important event, which is nothing but menstrual cycle, which is very, very, very important. So reproductive cycle in female primates are called as menstrual cycle. So the first menstruation is called menarche and the last menstruation is termed as menopause. So you know the age. This menstruation, that is menarche, will happen anywhere between 11 to 15 years or sometimes even 10 years, and this menopause will happen at the age of 50 to 52 or 55 years. So this cyclic menstruation is an indicator of normal reproductive phase and extends between menarche and menopause. So what is the important event here? One ovum will be released during ovulation at the middle of each menstrual cycle. You should remember that each ovary functions every alternative month. For example, if ovary 1 is releasing one ovum in the first month, after that it will release only in the third month. So these are the events in menstrual cycle. You can see the endometrial line degrading and it is degenerating and regenerating, how the hormonal fluxes are present. So before knowing this diagram, we should know this part. So first phase is called as the menstrual phase, which lasts for 1 to 5 days, or they are generally given as 4 to 5 days to indicate first day to fifth day. Okay, so here what happens is the primary follicle will be just present. It will initiate lightly, it will start to grow, and what happens? So these are the changes in the ovary, changes in the uterus, and the hormonal changes. Hormonal changes include your pituitary hormone and your ovarian hormones. So what are the changes in the uterus? During the first menstrual phase, you can see the endometrial lining are degrading. Again, what is going to happen? So since this endometrial lines are degrading, I said progesterone levels will be reduced because corpus luteum will degrade into corpus albicans, right? So this decreased level of progesterone will stimulate the FSH and it will bring an increase in the FSH. So that is follicle stimulating hormone. So after that, what happens? After this menstrual phase, follicular phase will start. This follicular phase is also called as proliferative phase. So it is also called as proliferative phase. So why proliferative phase is, as the follicles develop, the endometrial line also, you can see the endometrial line is also developing. So that is why it is called as proliferative phase. Proliferation is nothing but some rapid increase or development, right? So here we saw that in ovary, the follicles develop into a mature Graafian follicle from day 6 to day 13. So again, what are the changes in the uterus? The endometrium will regenerate through proliferation. That is why it is called as proliferative phase. And what are the hormonal changes? FSH and estrogen will increase. As I said, low progesterone will stimulate FSH and the developing follicles will produce the estrogen. So next is the ovulatory phase, or sometimes it is also called as the ovulation. So it happens on the 14th day. It is variable 14th to 16th day. So here what happens? The Graafian follicle is going to rupture and going to release the secondary oocyte. Then what will happen in the uterus? Again, the endometrial lining will increase its thickness. And what happens? A major event here is LH peak, or it is also called as LH surge. That is, the luteinizing hormone will release its peak. Only then it will help the Graafian follicle to rupture and release the ovum. So you should remember LH surge, it is the ovulation day. Then last phase is going to be the luteal phase, which will be continuing from 15th to 28th day, which is nothing but these emptied Graafian follicle. Again, it is going to develop into corpus luteum. So that is why we are calling this also as luteinizing phase or luteal phase, or it is also called as secretory phase. So what is this corpus luteum going to secrete? It is going to secrete progesterone. As I said, this progesterone will increase the thickness of endometrium even more. It will just even more increase the thickness and it will be prepared for fertilization. That is, it will be prepared for receiving a fertilized zygote. And here what happens to the hormones? LH and FSH decrease. Why FSH decrease? Because no more follicle should start developing now. So it should only happen in a cycle-wise manner, right? So no new follicle should develop, so FSH will decrease. As I said, corpus luteum produce progesterone and its level increase. So if fertilization is not occurring, corpus luteum will degenerate into corpus albicans, as I said. So what will happen now? The progesterone levels will go down, so it will allow the endometrium to degenerate again. It will be losing, or the endometrium will be losing its stability and it will be degenerating. Again, this cyclic process continue. Again, this low level of progesterone stimulate FSH and the follicles start growing, endometrium also start growing. So this is a cyclic process. So the next process will be insemination, where the sperm is being deposited into the female's vagina. So here that process is called as insemination, and this occurs during coitus. As we saw, 200 to 300 million sperms are being entering or being released during coitus, and then it is being deposited. But why only very less? But what are the barriers for a sperm to reach the proper ovum? So the first barrier is it should reach the correct fallopian tubule. As I said, only one ovary will function in every alternative month. It should reach the correct fallopian tubule, and apart from that, the cervical and vaginal mucus, the uterotubal junction and the narrow fallopian tubule, also the corona radiata and the cells that are surrounding the layers that are surrounding the ovum will also act as a barrier. Also, some phagocytic cells are present in the female reproductive tract that is also very dangerous to the sperms. That is why all copulations will not lead to fertilization and pregnancy. So next part will be fertilization, which we have already seen. What is going to happen here is first binding of sperm and then acrosomal reaction, penetration through zona pellucida, fusion of plasma membrane, and then what will happen is the nucleus will interact and form a zygote, that is 2N. So now you can ask, many sperms will interact with a particular egg, but why only one sperm can react with an egg? So when the zona pellucida layer and sperm are interacting, this zona pellucida layer will undergo some structural change, so that after that no sperm can come and bind to that particular ovum. So how many chromosomes will be present in a zygote? So it will be for sperm N and ovum N, totally 2N. So just they are asking ploidy, so just write it as 2N. So this is the sex determination in human beings, as you all are aware of that. Again, I am telling you, so this father or any man will contain two different gametes, that is X and Y, and the female will contain both X and X. So who is responsible for determining the sex of baby? It is the male partner. So if that father's X is fusing with the X of mother, it will be a female. If Y is fusing with X of the mother, it will be a male. So the probability will always be 50-50. And who is the key role in determining the sex of the baby? It is the father and not the mother. So next will be our implantation. As soon as the zygote is formed, so all the meiotic divisions are over. So now concentrate only on mitotic division. So the first mitotic division is generally called as cleavage. And here what happens, it will be developing into 2, 4, 6, 8 and 16 daughter cells, and those daughter cells are generally called as blastomeres. So the embryo with 8 to 16 blastomeres are called as morula, and then the morula continues to divide and forms a blastocyst as it moves further into the uterus. So the blastomeres are arranged in an outer layer called trophoblast and inner layer called as embryoblast. You can see this in a blastocyst. The blastomeres are arranged as an outer layer and inner layer. I have already given here. So here the embryo, that is the zygote, is keeping on moving. So this is in blastocyst. It is divided into outer trophoblast and inner embryoblast. This trophoblast is going to fuse with the endometrium and they are going to bind, and this inner mass cells, that is embryoblast, are going to form as an embryo. So the trophoblast layer get attached to the endometrium and inner mass get differentiated into the embryo. So you should see all these events are also important. So this occurs, that is implantation of blastocyst occurs within 8 to 9 days or even 7 to 9 days. It is variable, generally 1 week to 9 days. So how the implantation of blastocyst is happening? What does the blastocyst contains? It contains outer tropoblast, inner embryoblast. Tropoblast is going to implant the zygote and embryoblast is going to develop as the embryo. So this implantation will lead to the pregnancy. So blastocyst becomes embedded in the endometrium of uterus. So that is called as implantation, and implantation will lead to what? It will lead to pregnancy. So pregnancy and embryonic development. What are the embryonic development that are seen? So you can see finger-like projections that are appearing on the tropoblast called chorionic villi. So this chorionic villi and uterine tissue fuse together to form a placenta. So you know placenta will facilitate the supply of oxygen and nutrients to the developing embryo, and also it will remove the waste products that are released from the embryo. So placenta is connected to the embryo through the means of an umbilical cord, which will help in transport of substance. So you can see this is an embryo, this is an umbilical cord with its vessel, and you can also see the placental villi. So three important things should be noted here. What are the functions of placenta? Apart from transporting food and removing waste, placenta also act as an endocrine tissue in producing certain hormones. So hormones like HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin, human placental lactogen, estrogens and progesterones are produced. Out of this, relaxin is also very important hormone that is produced in the later period of the pregnancy. So in this you must remember HCG, HPL and relaxin are very important and are present in women only during the time of pregnancy. Relaxin is nothing but relaxin will help to relax the muscles of your pelvic region and it will smooth the cervix, and HCG will check the level of progesterone constantly, and HPL will also do the check of other hormones and the production of other hormones. So these three hormones HCG, HPL and relaxin are produced in women only during the time of pregnancy, and that is very important. In addition to that, cortisol, prolactin, thyroxine is also produced, which will increase in several folds in maternal blood. Again, prolactin is responsible for lactation. So we will be discussing about that. So why these hormones are produced? This is because to support the growth of the baby and to maintain the metabolic changes that are happening during pregnancy. So immediately after implantation, what happens? The embryo will differentiate into three different layers: ectoderm, mesoderm, that is outer ectoderm, middle mesoderm and inner endoderm. So what will ectoderm form? It will form the external skeleton, mesoderm develop into organ, and endoderm forms the inner lining of all the organs. So these are the stages of embryonic development. So when is the heart formed? After 1 month heart is formed. So after that, through which the baby's growth can be noticed is through the heartbeat through a stethoscope. So by the end of the first trimester, most of the major organ system will be formed. For example, limbs and external genital organs are well developed. So these are the fetal development. So here what happens is in week 9 to 15 you can see reproductive organs, tooth buds, eyelids, fetus is very active, brain activity can be detected. From week 16 to 26 brain develops rapidly and alveoli form in the lungs, and internal parts of eyes and ears also form, eyebrows, eyelashes and nails appear, muscles develop. So whereas in week 27 to 38, the body fat will increase rapidly, bones will complete their development, head hair gets coarse and thicker, and brain is also continuously active. So the next part will be parturition and lactation, where we'll be discussing delivery and how the breast milk is being produced and it is fed to the baby. One hormone called oxytocin plays a major role here. Apart from that, as you remember, the middle layer of the uterus, that is myometrium, which contains smooth muscle, should contract. So this is just a reflex. The baby pushes against cervix, causing it to stretch. Stretching of cervix causes nerve impulse to be sent to brain, and then brain stimulates posterior pituitary to release oxytocin. oxytocin will cause furthermore contraction and it will enable to expel the baby, and this is called as fetal ejection reflex. So if you could remember, it is again I'll recall it, it is called as the fetal ejection reflex, and this is called parturition. So expulsion of baby out of the uterus through the birth canal is called as parturition, and how it occurs? It occurs through fetal ejection reflex. And which hormone is helping here? It is the oxytocin. So again, lactation. So this lactation will happen through the female mammary glands, which structure we have already studied. So here it will undergo many differentiation and start producing milk towards the end of the pregnancy. So the first milk is called as colostrum. This breast milk is very important. Why? Because this breast milk contains several antibodies that are very essential for the development of baby. Apart from the nutrition, breast milk contains many antibodies which will be helpful in developing the immune system of the baby. That is why they say breast milk is very important for a newborn baby. So this is lactation. So prolactin is an hormone which helps in the production of milk, whereas oxytocin will help in the milk ejection, and that is also called as milk let down reflex. So here what happens? Suckling will stimulate the areola of the nipple and it will carry the signal to the hypothalamus, and oxytocin is being released by posterior pituitary, and this oxytocin will allow the mammary glands to contract and milk let down occurs. So prolactin and oxytocin will function here. So next will be reproductive health, and again this is a new topic, that is new chapter. So reproductive health contains one major important concept on which we will concentrate more, others we will have just a blush up. So total well-being in all aspects of reproduction, that is physical, emotional, behavioral and social, is called as reproductive health. So how can this be maintained? This can be maintained by family planning, that is this was initiated in the 1951 under the Reproductive and Child Health Care program. So many posters, and it was promoted by government mostly in order to increase the reproductive health of people in our country. So one more important thing which should be implemented in many countries are the sex education. Why it should be implemented? This can give a clear-cut idea about sex and coitus about adolescent children and people, so that misconception about sex related aspects can be avoided, and apart from that, information about sexually transmitted diseases can also be provided, so that what can be done is adolescent people will have an awareness, and also many people who doesn't know about STDs will also have an awareness and undergo protected sex. So this should even be encouraged in schools. So then what do these action plans require? So if reproductive health should be maintained and family planning has to be done and all these sex STDs and sex related awareness has to be created, what should be done? It should be requiring strong infrastructural facilities, then many medical professionals are required and material support is also required. Next important topic is amniocentesis. Amniocentesis is very important because it will help the detection of several diseases that will be present in the developing fetus. So amniocentesis is just a procedure. So what they will do, they will remove the amniotic fluid, that is they will just take few ml of amniotic fluid that is present in the uterus surrounding the baby for treatment. So for what amniotic fluid is taken? It is taken to test for Down syndrome, hemophilia, sickle cell anemia. So these are genetic disorders again which we will be discussing in the next chapter. So again it will also determine the survivability of the fetus. So one more important thing which is banned in India is this amniocentesis is important for determining the sex of the baby. Again it is banned in India because of the female feticide. So it is banned under PNDT Act. So imprisonment of 3 years and 10,000 fine, and if it is again done, it will be non-bailable and non-compoundable offence. So this is the PNDT Act which is banned, or which tells that the sex of the baby should not be determined before the birth. So population stabilization and birth control. So population of the world has increased rapidly. So in May 2011, the Indian population is alone 1.2 billion. And why this alarming rate of population has been increased? Because of decrease in maternal mortality rate and infant mortality rate, as well as increase in number of people of reproducible age is responsible for this. So how can we overcome this? By advising reproducible age couples to undergo or undertake some contraceptive methods. So what are contraception or contraceptive method? It aims to prevent pregnancy by it can help keeping the sperms and ovum apart, stop the egg production, or stopping the combination of sperm, or even sometimes it can prevent the fertilized ovum or fertilized zygote to be implanted in the uterus. So what are the characters of an ideal contraceptive? We say contraceptive should be used, but what should be its characters? So these are important because sometimes normal questions, highly thinkable questions or general questions can be asked apart from out of the textbooks. At that time, these things can help you, and that is why we are discussing it here. So an ideal contraceptive, it should be user friendly, easily available, effective, and it should be reversible with very less or no side effects. So it should not affect the sexual drive or desire of the user in any way. So there are various contraceptive methods available about which we will be discussing. The first one is natural or traditional method. So this contains three major things: periodic abstinence, coitus interruption, and lactational amenorrhea. Periodic abstinence is nothing but knowing the ovulation time and preventing having coitus during that time, that is from 10 to 17 days or during that time. If coitus or sex is being avoided, you can prevent pregnancy, but this is not an exact thing to prevent pregnancy, just this can be followed. The second thing is coitus interruption, that is before insemination there will be withdrawal of the penis of the male partner. So this prevents the insemination process. Lactational amenorrhea is nothing but during the lactation period, absence of menstruation will be there. So here this is only effective for 6 months or even lesser than that. So next is barrier method, where several barriers are used in order to prevent the meeting of sperm and ovum. So meeting of sperm and ovum is prevented using barrier method. There are many barriers available. Condoms are one which are available for both male and female, which are made up of rubber or latex. So next is diaphragm and cervical cap, which are for female. So the diaphragm fix over the cervical opening and prevent the sperm from entering the uterus. Here cervical cap will be having a cervical contraceptive jelly which will kill the sperms or make the environment unfavorable for sperm. So cervical cap will cover the cervix, diaphragm will fit against the vaginal wall. So next are the intrauterine devices. So here these are inserted in the uterus of the women only by medical expertise and not by themselves. So these are available in various variations. They are non-medicated IUDs, copper releasing IUDs and hormone releasing IUDs. So example will be, we will just see that for non-medicated it is Lippes loop, copper releasing copper T and copper 7, hormone releasing it is the progesterastat or LNG20. It is very important to remember here copper ions release using copper releasing IUDs will suppress the sperm mobility and fertilizing capacity of the sperm. So hormone releasing IUD will make the uterus unsuitable for implantation and cervix hostile for the sperms. So IUDs are ideal when they want to delay pregnancy or when they want gap between one child and the other, space between the children. So these are the IUDs, Lippes loop, copper releasing IUDs, copper T, and this is progesterastat. So next is pills. So pills are orally administered. So what is again administered? Progesterone or progesterone estrogen combinations. So for a period of 21 days. So for what? To inhibit ovulation and alter the quality of cervical mucus. So one pill which was developed in India in Lucknow by CDRI is Saheli. Saheli is a 1 week once in a week pill, and it is a non-steroidal preparation. So it is just cost 25 rupees for one whole sachet. So India has developed this, and it is having very less side effects. So injections or implants are done under the skin. Again, progesterone and progesterone in combination with estrogen. This can last much longer than your oral pills. Next will be surgical methods. These are very important. Here vasectomy for the male is done and tubectomy for the female is done. So this is for male and this is for female. Vasectomy is nothing but a small part of vas deferens is cut and tied. Tubectomy, again a small part of fallopian tubule is cut and tied, and this will also lead to infertility. So complete infertility is done here. Their reversibility is very poor. So you have to remember before going for this is generally called as a family planning, vasectomy and tubectomy for male and female. So their reversibility is very poor, but they are very highly efficient. So this has to be done, and after that the parents or the male or female partner who has undergone this family planning will become infertile. So next one will be medical termination of pregnancy, which is nothing but abortion or induced abortion. Why abortion is done? To get rid of unwanted pregnancies in several crimes like rapes and all those. So MTPs are also important when the continuation of pregnancy is harmful to the mother or the fetus. So MTPs are relatively safe during first trimester. So after that it is not safe. It is also made legal in India in the year 1971. So next will be sexually transmitted infections or sexually transmitted diseases. What are the common things? So they are gonorrhea, syphilis, genital herpes, genital warts, and hepatitis B and HIV are very important. And then, can these diseases be transmitted in any other ways apart from sexual, that is coitus? So apart from infections like hepatitis B and some infections like hepatitis B and HIV can also be transmitted by sharing injection needles, surgical instruments with infected persons, and transfusion of blood. You know, HIV/AIDS is a killer disease and it is very highly impossible to cure that. So except for hepatitis B, genital herpes and HIV infection, other diseases are completely curable if it is detected at the early stage and treated properly. So what are the symptoms? Again, there will be very mild symptoms which make it difficult for the person to analyze whether they have this STDs or not. They will just include itching, fluid discharge, slight pain and swellings in the genital region. So what can be the complications? It can cause pelvic inflammatory diseases, abortions, stillbirths, ectopic pregnancies, that is pregnancies in the fallopian tubule, infertility, or sometimes the cancer of reproductive tract. How can this be prevented? By having protected sex, or always try to use condoms, avoid sex with multiple partners. So if you have certain symptoms, go and consult a doctor during the early time of your symptoms itself. So infertility. So a large number of couples are infertile, that is they are unable to produce children in spite of unprotected sexual cohabitation. So why this is? What could be the reasons? There may be many physical, congenital, diseases, drugs, immunological or even physiological reasons. So to help them, many techniques called as assisted reproductive technologies are helping these infertile couple, and this is very important. In vitro fertilization, the fertilization is done under laboratory conditions. So as such, in the uterus condition, the laboratory conditions is created and the fertilization is done, and after that it is transferred into the mother's womb. If the mother is unable to carry, surrogate mother is also hired. So here what happens, if the male and female are healthy but fertilization is not happening, the ovum and sperm from the same partner is collected. So how the embryos are transferred? Zift and Gift technique are very important. So embryos up to 8th blastomere stage are transferred into the fallopian tubule itself, and that is called as Zift technique. And embryos with more than 8th blastomere stage are directly transferred into the or implanted into the uterus. So before 8th blastomere stage, it is transferred into the fallopian tubule, and that is Zift. And after 8th blastomere stage, it is the IUT, which is nothing but intrauterine transfer is being done. So next is GIFT, gamete intrafallopian tubule transfer. So in vitro fertilization, we saw that both these sperms, that is male and female gamete, are collected under laboratory condition. They are allowed to fuse and then they are implanted, whereas GIFT is nothing but for people who could not produce gamete, sperms or ovums are being injected so that they can have a baby of their own. So one more thing of in vitro fertilization will be ICSI. ICSI is nothing but intracytoplasmic sperm injection, which is nothing but the sperm which will not have a capacity to get into the ovum. Again, they will directly inject it into the egg cytoplasm. Again, one more important concept is artificial insemination or intrauterine insemination, where a male cannot produce sperms. Sperms are collected from a healthy individual and then it is injected. Sometimes sperms will not have motility. At that time also, sperms are being collected and injected into the uterus of the women. That is intrauterine insemination, IUI and AI. So you can ask the difference between IVF and ICSI, which IVF is nothing but fertilization is self-employed, penetration will happen as such. Whereas in ICSI, injection of sperm into egg under microscopic control. They will inject the sperm directly into the cytoplasm of the egg. Though many options are available, it is affordable only to a few number of people. So our law also permits legal adoption of babies. So best methods for couple looking for parenthood can also go for adoption method. So we are going to discuss previous year's question paper now. So this also I have already mentioned, 3 hormones produced in women only during pregnancy, HCG, HPL and relaxin. Label diagram to show the 4 accessory ducts in human male reproductive system. As I said, the second diagram is very important, which is also present in your textbook. And sectional view of human ovary showing the different stages of developing follicles like corpus luteum, corpus albicans and ovulation. So they have also mentioned corpus luteum. So before and after ovulation, you have mentioned that. So you have to draw the diagram of a mature human sperm and label any 3 parts and write their function. You can mention acrosome, you can mention nucleus, mitochondria and tail. So medically, it is advised all young mothers that breastfeeding is best for their newborn babies. Do you agree? Give the reasons for your support. So yes, you can mention about colostrum, the antibodies present in that, nutrition that are present in the baby. So baby requires more amount of nutrition. You can include all those points. So a large number of married couples all over are childless. It is shocking to know that in India, female is often blamed. We know that mistake can be on either side. In your opinion, so why in your opinion the female partner is often blamed for such situation? Mention any 2 values that you as a biology students can promote to check this social evil. Again, this is a general question. Why women are blamed? That is, our society is blaming women. It is a generalized question. You have to write for that. As a biological student, how can you tell that problem is not only with the female? You can tell that male can also have low sperm counts and motility will be very lesser. So state any 2 reasons responsible for causes of infertility, physical, congenital, any things can be, physiological factors can also be responsible. Suggest a technique that can help the couple to have a child where problems is with the male partner. So you should remember this. Again, they can go for IVF or they can go for artificial insemination instead, where sperms are collected from a healthy donor and injected into the uterus. So, why commonly sex-related issues are not discussed among parents and children in our society? What can we do for that? We can implement the idea of sex education in our society so that all sex related myths can be avoided. So by taking example of a local plant and animal, how could you help these parents to overcome such inhibitions about reproduction and sexuality? So you can see these are plants which are called as bee orchids, and sometimes male bee partners are attracted towards these and they will involve in coitus with this bee orchid's flowers. So similarly, human beings are also attracted to their opposite sex, and it is very generalized, and people, only when sex education is implemented, it can be spoken out freely in the schools and to parents as well as to people who are helping or who are thinking to support us. So IVF is a popular method in these days helping childless couple to bear a child. Describe the different steps carried out in this technique. So what are the steps? First, the sperm should be collected. Then what happens? The ovum should be collected under laboratory conditions. They should be allowed to fertilize. Then ZIFT or IUT is done. ZIFT is up to 8th blastomere stage. After 8th blastomere stage, it is directly transferred to the uterus and the baby will be developed and it will be expelled out and it will be delivered. So would you consider gift as an IVF? This is an important question. So gamete is directly transferred to the fallopian tubule. That is why it is called as GIFT technique. So here fertilization is happening inside the woman's body. It is in vivo and not in vitro. So that I am not supporting this as an in vitro fertilization. So again, sectional view of ovary showing all the follicle, and name the gonadotropins and explain their role in oogenesis and the release of ova. As we have already discussed in menstrual cycle, you have to mention about FSH, LH, progesterone and also estrogen. So next will be, you have to explain the application of each one of the following, that is amniocentesis, lactational amenorrhea and ZIFT. And then you also have to prepare a chart or chart work regarding reproductive and child healthcare program. Just a poster work, not a chart work, sorry, it is a poster work for your exam. So again, this is a generalized question. Amniocentesis, determining sex of the baby, genetic disorder, lactational amenorrhea, it can postpone the menstruation for 6 months so that the people can have safer sex, unsafe sex for that time. ZIFT technique, the up to 8th blastomere stage, the zygote is being transferred in the fallopian tubule. So you have to again explain the menstrual cycle in female, and again how this understanding can act as a contraceptive measure. Again you have to explain about the periodic abstinence. Again the menstrual cycle question, you can see this question is being repeated, and again same question is being repeated. How can this menstrual cycle help immensely in family planning? Do you agree with the statement? Provide your reason. So explain menstrual phase in human female. So same thing, again menstrual cycle question is being repeated. So you should remember again here one more question, Graafian follicle, label antrum and secondary oocyte. So menstrual cycle and the ovarian diagram is very important, and again you can also read that menstrual cycle chart, like how the endometrium is degrading, how the hormones are increasing, how the primary follicles are developing in till Graafian follicle, corpus luteum and corpus albigans. These questions are very important. So what should you practice here? Again diagram of male and female reproductive system, structure of sperm and ovum. Then you have to practice the diagram of ovary, uterus from oogenesis till implantation, development of the follicles till implantation you have to practice. Pathway of spermatogenesis and oogenesis for you to remember it easily. Then fertilization and implantation with the diagram, various contraceptive methods, sexually transmitted diseases, and important thing is assisted reproductive technologies, that is ART. So with this we are closing this chapter. So what did we discuss in this class? We discussed about male reproductive system, female reproductive system, gametogenesis, menstrual cycle, fertilization, implantation, pregnancy, parturition, lactation, and also important concepts like contraceptive methods, STDs, that is sexually transmitted diseases, MTPs, that is medical termination of pregnancy, and also about a very important concept, assisted reproductive technology. So in next class we will be discussing about the new unit genetics. So under that we will be discussing the chapter 5, principles of inheritance and variation. So it's time for me to leave and hope you have all understood the class very well. And before I leave, it's time for you to prepare. So start preparing, schedule, prepare and score. Thank you students. See you in next class.
For more queries, please contact buddi on 98408 44987 or visit buddi.life.